Hello, everyone. My name's Blake, and I'm a front-end developer on Confluence. And over the past few months, I've taken a trip to an interesting place as a front-end developer. I've taken a trip to a place called JavaScript Land. And let me tell everybody, JavaScript Land is absolutely crazy. It's nuts. It's completely bonkers. Let me tell you why. I realize it's basically just like a school playground. And you're probably thinking, Blake, JavaScript Land's a made-up place. Why is it like a school playground? It isn't making any sense at all. But if you think about it, in JavaScript, and in JavaScript Land, you always have to be keeping up with the latest fads and crazes. It's all always changing so much. And you're just starting to get used to jQuery when suddenly these guys show up, and they're like, what, you're not even using React.js? So believe it or not, this exact thing happened to us on the Confluence team, and so we had no choice but to go single-page app. I'm just kidding. We're not susceptible to bullies like that on Confluence team. What I'm really here to talk to you today about is why Confluence has gone single-page app, how we made the stack switch in our front-end stack to this new shiny React stack. We're going to talk about what went well, and also Atlassian's an open company. We're going to talk about what was difficult. I'm going to talk to you about our experience, and hopefully you can learn from that. So first of all, why single-page app? Well, before we talk about why, let's talk about what is single-page app. Can I get a show of hands? Who here in the room is working on a single-page app or using React.js? Oh yeah, so a fair few of you. So for those of you who don't know, basically, in the most concise way, single-page apps are website navigation without the page pop. So I'm going to say page pop a lot, so I'm going to try and explain it to you as clear as possible now with an example. Let's pretend Facebook was not a single-page app, and this is my timeline. So as you can see, I've taken some photos of the nice hotel view. Let's say I'm on my timeline and I want to visit the About page. If Facebook was not a single-page app, I'd click on About. I'd get a white screen for a short amount of time, or maybe a longer amount of time if you've got Sydney internet like I do. And then, boom, you'd be on the About page. That's that white bit, that white flash, that was the page pop. So let's pretend that Facebook is a single-page app. Well, it is, so we don't need to pretend. But if Facebook was a single-page app, you'd click on the About link. You get this cool little spinner, and then boom, the About stuff is there in the content area. So the key thing you need to notice is that like my profile picture, my cover photo didn't really change. Just the stuff in the content area changed. And that's what single-page apps are all about, just changing the content without having to do a full page re-render. And what that ends up with is actually the best user experience on the web, in my opinion. And that's for a few reasons. Firstly, you've got faster navigation. With no page pops, navigation is just quicker, and it's just less frustrating wait times. Second of all, it's native-like. And I mean native as in like mobile app native. Everyone's got a smartphone nowadays, and everyone's used to using fast, slick, native apps. And we want to satisfy users who are accustomed to these slick, native mobile apps on the desktop. And single-page apps are the best way to allow us to do that. Finally, single-page apps are just easier to use. Because there's faster navigation and it's less frustrating, it's less punishing when you go to somewhere wrong. It's very easily to go back or navigate elsewhere if you click on a wrong link. So again, this all builds up to a less frustrating user experience. Another reason why we decided to go single-page app is that everyone else is doing it. And I know it sounds like the bullies got to us, but just hear me out for a second. If you think about it, the web as a whole is a market that Confluence can be compared to. And even though Facebook's a social media network and Confluence is very different, they can still be compared side by side as web apps. So imagine if a user's on Facebook and they're navigating from the timeline to the About page like I showed before, and then it's all snappy, they got the cool loader, and it's all single-page app. And then they go to Confluence and they see the page pops, they're going to be like, oh, this is slow, why is it like this? Facebook doesn't do it. Additionally, if you can see down the bottom, we have hip chat, going React as you know about, and maybe some other Atlassian products. By walking the same paths as other teams at Atlassian, we get to build better products together and share knowledge and overall build the best products as a team. So millennials, that's young people. They're getting jobs and they're maybe or maybe not reading books like this, hopefully not. And they're not only getting jobs, but they're making decisions. And like I said, they're used to slick mobile app experiences, and they care about a good web experience as well. It'd really suck if a customer decided to not choose Confluence because it wasn't as snappy or quick as what they're used to or grown up with. So in summary, single-page apps, they're good for our users, and they're good for our market. Okay, so we decided everyone was right, the bullies were right, we want to go single page app. But how did we go about the process of changing our front-end stack to React.js? How do you make such a drastic change in such a large code base? Well, first I just want to emphasize with this really big, clear slide that change is not easy. Not only do you need to change your whole software stack, but you need to change your processes, your testing, your continuous integration, your team's skill set, and sometimes even your way of thinking, all the while still delivering value to customers. And I just want to emphasize that last point again. One thing you can't do is go to your manager and say, okay, we're not going to be delivering anything for 2 months until we ramp up single page app. You need to make sure that you've got some strategies in place to deal with these tough changes that are incoming. So before I talk about these strategies that we use, I'm just going to talk about where we came from and talk about the new React stack as well. So our old stack was a mix of technologies. We had things like jQuery, Backbone, and Marionette, and even some other ones depending on what team did what throughout the front-end stack. And these libraries are fine, they're good, they were really useful for what we did, but the inconsistencies and variance across the stack made it quite difficult to work with. This is the stack we're running now. We've got React with ES6 or ES 2015 for the user interface. We use Redux and Normalizer for our state and data management, and we use Chai and Enzyme for what I like to call intuitive testing. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on each of these right now. So React. We use React with ES6 classes to build our UI. So for those of you who don't know, the React way is all about building up your UI from many individual components, and those components update themselves as the data that backs them changes. By structuring our application accordingly, we can effortlessly build many components and then compose them together into the main app at the end during a merge. We use Redux and Normalizer for our state and data management. This is sort of representation of Redux. So the problem is, when you have a lot of components in a big application like Confluence, they all have data behind them, and managing that data can get out of hand really quickly. So we knew we'd need some way to manage that. And Redux is a really popular solution, so we decided to try it out. Very basically, Redux provides a way to unify all your application's data in the store on the left there. And then the data that your components need is fed down through the application and component chain all the way down. So that's, for long component chains, that's a bit of a pain, but that's just the way it is. Normalizer is a Redux library that, as you might expect, normalizes all the data that's kept in your store. So yeah, Confluence is really big. We have a lot of REST APIs and a lot of ways to get the same kind of data. For example, we have the all updates feed, which is a list of content. We have the popular feed, which is a list of content. We have recently worked on, which is a list of content. It would be really difficult and inefficient to maintain 3 copies of content right throughout the application. So what Normalizer allows us to do is build 1 copy of the content normalized in our store, and then that's fed down to our components, like the all updates, popular, and recently worked on feeds, and then it can render from there. So these libraries do a whole lot more, but I recommend looking on the internet for a whole lot of talks dedicated to Redux and Normalizer. They're going to go into a lot more detail about the topic. Finally, this is my favorite part of the stack, the intuitive testing. This is a Chai assertion, and it makes testing a lot of fun. It's a very fluent API. It looks basically like English, and you don't even need to be a programmer to know what it does. Making my first tests for my components was an absolute breeze thanks to this library, and I wish more libraries shared this fluent API philosophy. So that's sort of where we're at now. Let's talk about some strategies that we use to make that switch. So when I was making this presentation, I realized one of the important things that we did was choosing a good starting point for our React journey. So what we started with was the dashboard. So that was good for a few reasons. Firstly, it's a logical starting point. It's very easy to build up whole use cases from here, right? This is where users enter the application. Once we have that converted, we can easily build up the all updates use case, viewing my work use case, and now we're working on space navigation from there. The dashboard is really well understood. It was very fresh in our minds. We just shipped the new dashboard for 5.9, and I worked a lot on that. And then having to rewrite it again in React was a little frustrating to begin with. But looking back, it was actually a really good idea because we just built it, we knew it very well, we understood the requirements of each module and the dependencies, and we had a good idea of how to split the work and who knew what. Finally, the dashboard is very frequently used. It's where most people land in Confluence, and we'd know very quickly if something went wrong, or we'd be able to get user feedback a lot more easily on a very frequently used part of the site. There's not much point trying this new library on a page that no one ever visits, because you're never going to be able to know how it went or what users are thinking. This is a picture of Yoda. It was really good to have someone like Yoda on our team. And in my case, it was my team lead, Drew, who was the Yoda on our team. And the idea of this Yoda on our team brings expertise, vision, passion, and enthusiasm to the project. And the main role of having a Yoda on your team was to get everyone motivated and in motion. And I think this was probably the most important thing that got us through single page app, was having that one passionate person on our team to push it through. And I'm wondering, maybe you can be Yoda on your team if you're interested in taking this journey. You don't have to be wise or green or anything, but the main things are passion and enthusiasm, and your willingness to push, to learn, and to master the technology. One thing our Yoda did was run Bootcamp classes. So this is one of the things I enjoyed the most during our process of stat switching. So basically, these Bootcamp classes, you can sort of imagine it was like Friday, 4 o'clock, pretty tired, kind of sitting in a room, gathering around Drew's computer, watching him do, I can't even remember, I think it was like showing us how to do a REST call in Confluence, in the React version of Confluence at least. And I really enjoyed that a lot, because even though it was like tiring, like I said, it was really interesting to see React in context of our own application. And you can read a lot about React and read all the theory you want, but until you see it in the context of Confluence or whatever you're building, you don't really get it. You don't really understand it. So this was a really satisfying thing to do, and I think Bootcamp classes are a really good idea for you guys to run. So in summary, during our stack switching process, we were delivering frequently, keeping our managers happy. We picked the right starting point, in this case, the Confluence dashboard, and we had the passionate leadership of Yoda. Okay, so we switched. One went well. Well, the number one best thing that happened after our stack switch, of course, was being part of the cool kids list. That's us on the Babel Who's Using Us list. There we go. We've done it. Mission successful. We're not going to get bullied. We're the cool kids on the playground. Not quite. We actually had a lot of much more epic successes than just being on the cool kids list. One of the most impactful changes we had was our deployment speed. We've got really rapid deployment now that we're in React.js land. So deployment has never been more rapid on pretty much any project I've ever worked on, maybe aside from like university projects that were just static HTML or whatever. But we go from merge to staging in 5 minutes, and we can release really soon after that, and it's just incredible. Rapid deployment has a ton of benefits. If you went to Ian's talk yesterday on highly effective teams, you'd know all about that. But most importantly to me, rapid deployment makes my boss happy, and it allows me to see my stuff out in the wild and get feedback on my changes really quickly. One of the main reasons we got this amazing speed boost was because we separated our front-end repository from the Confluence repository. So what I mean by that is our front-end has its own repository, its own code, testing, continuous integration, and deployment, and Confluence is completely separate to that. This means when we merge code into when we want to change the front-end repository, we don't have to rebuild the whole Confluence container and ship it, which is a lot slower than shipping just the front end by itself. It's really fast and it's a lot of fun. On the software side, React components are really awesome, and hopefully those of you who have worked with React will agree with me. And there's a few reasons why I really like components. The first one is that they're nice to test, especially with China enzyme like I described before. So the reason why they're nice to test is that components are usually one visual unit. They have a clear set of responsibilities, so it's easy to know once you've tested everything and what they need to do. Secondly, there's no stepping on toes. I love git auto merge, and components allow me to use it a lot. Components are very often isolated. 90% of the time when I'm working on a new feature, I'll be working on my own set of components that no one else is going to touch, or I'm consuming from some shared components that I don't really need to edit. So after working in a big team, I've come to sort of dread the merge process. Has anyone in the room here, can I see a show of hands, have you been working on a project, you've spent a couple of weeks on it, about to merge the feature, but then boom, merge conflict? Has that happened to anybody? Yeah, quite a lot. That doesn't happen to me with using components, so that's one good reason to swap over to React. Finally, components are really nice to debug. Hot reloading is only an npm install away, and it makes your debugging easy and really fun and interactive. It's super satisfying to make some changes in IntelliJ. IntelliJ will save it for you as you type, and then you just switch over to Chrome, your browser, and you can watch the components reload right in front of your eyes. It's just really satisfying and awesome. On a similar note, it's just a lot of fun and a pleasure to develop for. ES6 was awesome. I feel way more productive writing in ES6 than I have any language I've ever used before. I guess we should take that with a grain of salt because I said similar things about jQuery just 2 years ago, so maybe in 2 years I'll be eating my words, but we'll have to see. Working with a fun framework makes developers more happy overall, and and more productive. And I think we all feel like we're edging closer and closer to being one of those 10x engineers that Sri was talking about yesterday at the fireside. So that was some of the good things that happened out of our transition. But as I said before, change isn't easy. We and the world are still learning the best ways to build single-page applications. So we also had, of course, a few struggles along the way. One of the major challenges we predicted going into this project was developer onboarding. And this WikiHow picture of how to board a small vessel really captures the essence of our developer onboarding. It kind of feels a lot like this, walking along this dodgy wooden plank onto a tiny boat, worried about drowning in the ocean of knowledge just beneath your feet. But developer onboarding is really important because if no one masters the new technology, then the app's going to be built poorly in the end. So you need to make sure everyone gets on board as soon as possible. We had a few strategies for dealing with that. First of all, we had a whole sprint dedicated to learning React in our own way. So for 2 weeks, we were completely self-managed and just learned React however we wanted to. So I really like this because I believe everyone has different ways of learning things, and programming is especially very practical. And so it's really important to get your hands dirty as soon as possible. I personally am a huge fan of games, board games, video games, whatever, I like it. And so for my React project in 2 weeks, I remade one of my favorite board games in React. And that was super fun. I was super motivated to do that because it was something I wanted to do, and I learned a lot, and self-driven, and it was very satisfying. It was also really satisfying because at the end of the 2 weeks, we demoed what we did to the rest of the team. And so we all got to see what everyone was passionate about, what they managed to achieve in that 2 weeks, and sort of show off what we learned and compared what we liked and didn't like about the process. The second thing I touched on before were Bootcamp classes. These were formal tutorials tailored to our own stack on Confluence. And this was great in combination with the personal research that we did before because raw knowledge isn't enough. You need to be able to see React or whatever library you're switching to in context of your own system to be able to really get it and understand it. Especially when a lot of the benefits of React are for large projects, and Redux especially, it was really good to see it actually in Confluence, which is a large project. Finally, one thing we did a lot of was pair programming. So pair programming is when you get 2 developers to work on a feature together. Ideally, one of the developers is experienced and the other one's inexperienced. And they build a feature together, and the inexperienced developer ideally learns things along the way. So that's really good because you keep your velocity up by getting features out the door, but also you get new developers on board and you can push to master that technology. JavaScript is one rapidly moving ecosystem, I often feel like that guy at the back there trying to navigate my way through the rapids, which are in a playground and there's bullies, and like I said, JavaScript Land is crazy, guys. So, it's more than just jQuery versus React. It's, you got Gulp and Grunt and Browserify, Webpack, Flux, Redux, Immutable, Normalizer, whether to use ES6 classes, ES7, the list just goes on. Every week there's a new blog post announcing the new way to code on the front of HackerNews. So you need to make sure you can navigate your way through these JavaScript rapids. We had a few key strategies to getting through the JavaScript rapids that I'm going to talk about now. First of all, I think it's a really good idea to refactor early. So if you want to pick up a new library or something that you see on the front page of HackerNews, that's absolutely fine. But it's best to do it as soon as possible. We found that leaving our pull requests open for too long led them to not being implemented at all, or just way too much work to maintain. Because as you have a pull request open for a refactor, the main feature branch is still progressing. And so as that progresses, you have to keep refactoring and refactoring. And it's just extremely painful and led to things not being done at all. It's a good idea to do it while there's less code and to focus on a small area of the application. On a kind of opposite note, you don't want to refactor too early. You don't want to waste your time on unproven stuff. Don't refactor the day the blog hits. And the reason why I say that is no one knows your application better than you do. You need to evaluate anything you pick up in the context of your own application and your own team's requirements. So maybe this new library that you found is it's 5 times faster or whatever, but it adds a lot of development overhead, and you've got a lot of new developers on your team, and it's going to be really difficult to onboard them if you pick up yet another library. Maybe that's not worth it then. You need to think about that. One thing that we did a lot of for picking up new libraries was a thing called spiking. That's where we usually have one developer take 2 or 3 days just sort of testing out a new library or a new feature on a small part of the code base. Then they'll open a pull request, and we'll all look at it and review it, talk about what we like and what we don't like about the new library. And if we all like it, then we'll finish the spike and merge it. And if we don't like it, we just throw away. There's not much investment in that spike, so there's no problem with that. Finally, I think it's a good idea to get everyone involved in your refactor, because you get to share a lot of knowledge through practice. It seems kind of counterintuitive to get everyone involved on your refactors, because it kind of seems like you're going to be losing velocity, not making features if everyone's involved. But we found out the best factors we did were together, because it kept everyone on the same page, and it gave everyone some experience with what I like to call the back end of the front end, sort of the nitty-gritty, sort of understanding how Redux and all that sort of stuff works. And when everyone understands it on a deeper level, they're going to do better feature work, and overall velocity is going to improve. So I really recommend when you do a refactor, just do it together. So in summary, I think it's a good idea to get your developers on board as soon as possible. Try new things, but not too many new things. Just be careful, think about it in the context of your own team, and get everyone involved. And before I go, I just want to mention this guy one last time. We went through all the crazy JavaScript rapids, we got bullied on the playground, and we had all those struggles that I mentioned before. But having this Yoda on our team was what really got us through in the end. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from all this, it's that you can be Yoda too, and you can drive your team through the rapids, make it through the playground, and into the awesomeness that is single-page applications. Thank you very much.